Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So the intro montage of this episode, I spent that time replacing the valve cover gaskets on the SC and finally reinstalling my beloved upper timing cover. So this car, the valve cover gaskets, at least from what I could tell, were leaking, and when I took the car down the road shortly after getting it back here, it left a nice little snail trail of oil all down the driveway, all up it. Not enough where I was going to run the engine out of oil, but enough where it was an issue that needed to be solved. So I knocked those out, and once the car gets back together, we can test it out and ensure, or verify rather, that that was actually the case and that I solved the issue. I'm also really excited to have announced the Aristo's arrival so I can stop hiding it in the background. And the last bit of off-camera work, or the last bit that was some off-camera work, I should say, was knocking out these little reinforcement gussets on the head flange of the SC's new turbo header. So the idea behind these is just to provide a little bit more structure between the head flange and all of the tube primaries, being that this is a 16 gauge tube header as opposed to schedule pipe. A little bit of additional reinforcement, especially on a critical joint, or critical joints rather, such as these head flange joints, it seemed like a pretty good idea. So the header is now 100% ready to go back on the car, and unfortunately my new exhaust manifold studs are currently being held hostage by the lovely U.S. Customs Department. So hopefully they ensure that I'm not shipping anything nefarious, that it is just a handful of fasteners, and get those pushed through in the not too distant future. But in the meantime, I can kind of ram jam the header back on the car to start the subject of this video, which is the new downpipe for the SC. So I debated a few different material options for the downpipe, or I should say I debated two. There was a 321 stainless option and a titanium option. And the more that I thought about it, with this being a tube header and it being a little bit different than something like the Mark II, where the turbo, I can easily hold it with one hand and it won't see extreme duty, I figured that something a little bit lighter would be a better option for this car, so that way I'm less likely, due to the weight of the downpipe, to end up fracturing and destroying the header. So it should be no surprise that I went with my good friends at Incan Industries, and we have another smorgasbord of titanium materials and a little bit of stainless, which we'll get into why that is later in the video. But a bunch of titanium components to build the SC's new titanium downpipe. So I have some materials here, and I dug some old Tycon materials out of my titanium tote. And all of these things together should allow me to build a pretty nice downpipe for this car. So what the idea is to build a 3 to 3.5 inch transitional downpipe using this reducer cone or concentric diameter adapter cone to go from 3 inch on the turbine outlet to 3.5 inch, and then the rest of the materials aside from this 2.5 inch elbow right here are all 3 or 3.5 inch materials. 3.5 inch straight tubing, 3.5 inch bends, a couple of 3 inch V-bands and 2.5 inch V-bands for the wastegate stuff later on. But all of this stuff will come together and allow me to build, like I said, a pretty cool downpipe for this car. So in order to get started with this, I obviously have to put the header and the turbo in place. It would be really nice if I had my studs, but unfortunately that is not the case. So I'll put a couple of bolts in, hold everything together, and we can get started building this downpipe. The SC300's downpipe, or at least the initial body and form of it, is now all completed. So all of the welds came out pretty decently, and it's kind of interesting. You can see some of the heat banding on the outsides of kind of the first 3 or 4 butt welds. Then these ones down here don't have nearly as much. And kind of the only thing that has really changed from the first few welds to the last few is the ambient temperature in the shop. Right now we have a little bit of a cooler spell, and it's actually comfortable in the shop. If I were to guess, it's probably 70 degrees maybe, and I guess 75, but not nearly the 80 something, probably approaching 90 degrees that it has been. It's been so warm that I haven't really paid attention to the thermostat, as I'd rather just not know. But that being said, like I said, everything came out nicely. If we can see, probably can't see on the inside right now, but it's all purged, all came out nice, and most importantly, it is very light compared to what it would have been if it was a stainless downpipe. So now that this main section of the downpipe is completed, I need to figure out the more complex bit, which will be the wastegate recirculation. And there isn't a whole lot of room to make it work, especially with a big 60 millimeter wastegate and a 2.5-inch dump tube, but I'll have to figure something out, and I'm going to go ahead and pull the old catch can out, as I'll end up making a new one, and it may end up being kind of an impediment where it is right now. If the part isn't going to be there long term, well, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for it to be there during the fabrication and design process. So let me get all of that done, everything moved out, the downpipe in, and then we can start figuring out how to do this wastegate recirculation in a clean and cool way. And just like that, the SC's titanium downpipe is completed. So the latest additions are obviously the wastegate recirculation provision right there and the O2 bung right there. So this coolant bypass valve or whatever I will need to move it up or do some heat management around this hose here as it gets a little bit tight, but I was limited with the real estate that I had to put this big 2.5-inch wastegate recirc provision there, and I kind of just did the best that I could. It's easy to move things like that valve, but not so easy to fit provisions like that wastegate recirc provision in a place that looks aesthetically pleasing. And as far as the O2 bung is concerned, I tried to put it in a position where it was far enough from the actual turbine outlet to not get cooked, and far enough away from the wastegate recirculation to not get cooked as well. And with the downpipe completed now with all of its little accessories and little features, we can get started on the part that I'm really excited about, and that is the actual recirculation tube itself. So right here are all the materials for it, and what makes this special is this bend right here. This is a 625 Incan L 2.5-inch 90-degree bend. This is left over from when I built the Supra's header, I believe. And rather than it just sitting dormant in my Incan L tote for the rest of time, I figured this wastegate recirculation tube would be an excellent place to actually put it into service. So what we have is the tube, we have the TurboSmart wastegate outlet, flange, and clamp. We have a Stainless Bros 2.5-inch male V-band, and then an Ace Race Parts 2.5-inch flex bellows. And all of these things together, provided that I can fit them all in that kind of tight space there, will end up being the new wastegate recirculation tube for the SC. So why Incan L, or why I wanted to use Incan L for this? A, it's just kind of cool to be able to work with that material, but B, with it being a nickel alloy and a nickel super alloy, I guess, it's extremely resistant to high heat. Not that you generally will have an issue with rupturing, fracturing, otherwise having a failure of a wastegate recirculation tube, but using Incan L for this, and since I have the ability to do so, it's by far and large the correct material to use for this particular application. So without further ado, let's go ahead, start fitting, cutting, so on and so forth, and get this tube knocked out. The SC's Incan L wastegate recirculation tube is now completed. And although I'm not super happy with kind of this weird track that it takes, let me move my light over here. There we go. But kind of this swoop out that it has, not ideal, not exactly what I was going for, but it looks cool. Everything should work out perfectly fine with it. And it's another sub-project for the greater SC project that is completed. So I had to dive into my bag of tricks to make this work. The radius of the bend was too long, and I really didn't have enough space to make all of this fit. So I had to do some pretty aggressive grinding on the actual bend, and I even had to do some grinding on the flex bellows. But everything fits now, everything's good to go, and the next order of business will be to pull all of this back apart to install the new exhaust manifold studs. I finally got a notification that Customs decided to release them from whatever enhanced interrogation they were doing, and they should be here tomorrow. So I'm not sure if I'll have time to put them in tomorrow, but the next thing you guys will see in this video at least will be blowing this all back apart in order to put the studs in, to put the hot side together once and for all, and then we will address the elephant in the room, which is, what does this thing sound like? Cars are fun. Do this as a nice, relaxing hobby. Well, after fighting with the SC for the past 2 days, which the cause and effect is admittedly pretty stupid, I backed the car out yesterday to get the sound clips that you guys just witnessed. And had it pulled out, had the camera set up and everything, and the car shut off. And I went, okay, well, the thing runs really rich. It isn't tuned or anything, so it probably fouled the plugs. So I pulled the plugs out. Sure enough, they were very dirty. So I pulled a set of plugs I have for the Mark IV, put those into it, tried to start it, nothing. Tried to start it with my jump pack, which was close to dead, nothing. And I was like, man, what is going on? So I let the jump pack charge overnight, came in first thing this morning, tried to start it, still nothing, but I did notice that the fuel pumps sounded louder than they normally do. So I figured it would probably be a good idea to go and get a few gallons of fuel, throw it in the tank. I did so, powered the car up, the pumps quieted down, and I realized at that point that I'm just dumb and ran the car out of fuel. So thankfully it was an easy fix that way. The car sits and runs and idles and everything, although it certainly does need to be tuned. You guys saw the clouds of smoke coming out from under it. Needs to be leaned out quite a bit. And unfortunately, you can see all the oil down in there probably. The valve cover gasket on this side, need to pull it back apart. The gasket more than likely rolled over as I was installing it, and we have an oil leak there. But issues aside, I'm back to being happy at this point in time, since I can now actually hear it and drive it around and everything else. It's running again, which is the biggest thing. And after all of the efforts, all of the trials and tribulations and everything else, I hope you guys were able to tell that it does sound quite a bit different than a traditional standard 2JZ does. It isn't like a world of difference, but the tones the car produces do sound quite a bit disparate from a normal unequal length header, and it may be one of those things where you really just have to hear it in person. But I think it sounds awesome. And most importantly, now we have clearance to the alternator and everything else. And I have a hot side that I'm much happier with, that much better matches my current capabilities than what was on the car before. And I shouldn't have to build another one for quite a while. So with all that being said, before this car throws me for any more loops, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. So thank you guys, as always, for coming on all these different journeys and adventures and everything else with me. The SC, its resurrection project is well underway at this point in time, and I think the next order of business, after fixing the oil leak, obviously, will be to start working on the intercooler tubing. So we will cross that bridge in probably the next episode you guys will see on this. If you guys see in the background, Thomas's black Mark IV is back. He changed turbos on it, so I had to do a little bit of modification to the hot side intercooler tube, and now I have to do some hardline work. This will likely be an off-camera deal, just something I'm trying to bang out quickly for him to get it back to him so he can get it finished up the rest of the way and hopefully salvage a little bit of this season that we currently have. The Aristo is running great. And I guess I can give you guys a little sneak peek. It's now sitting on some new wheels and tires. I pulled the Mark IV's old wheels out, and I didn't intend to put it on different wheels right now, but I looked up tires for the factory Aristo wheels, and I think the only option that I was able to find were a set of snow tires, which I don't plan on driving this car in the snow, so it didn't make sense to get snow tires for it. So it's now sitting on a nice new set of Michelins, and the car drives phenomenally, which we will get into that in an upcoming episode. But with all of that being said, like I said before, I'm throwing for any more loops at this point in time with these stupid cars. That'll be the end of this one. So as always, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, check out the website for manifolds, for merch, for all things good that way, including my 15th anniversary t-shirts and hoodies available through the end of 2024. Please scoop those up because come 2025, they will be just a fond memory. With all of that being said, that'll be the end of this one, and I will see you guys in the next episode.